Okay, so let's take a look at some other popular searching platforms. PubMed is probably the second most popular search engine, so it can be found at this URL. But again, you can just as easily type in PubMed in Google search and you'll find it. So it's also publicly available and you don't need to pay for it. And PubMed is a search engine that relies on a series of bibliographic databases, primarily Medline. It's provided by the National Centre for Biotechnology Information, and it contains abstract level metadata with links to full text. It contains more than 27 million records, and it's since 1966, although some of the resources go as far back as 1809. So it contains more than 14 million links to full text articles as well, nearly 4 million free to read. So it's also a good database to search, and you might find different articles on PubMed than you'll find on Google Scholar. So if you desperately want to find absolutely every possible article on a topic, then I would highly recommend at least looking at both Google and PubMed. So here you can see a basic search. Again, I've just entered the same search terms and pressed the search button. So for PubMed, you might need to enter parentheses around the search terms between the Boolean terms. So I've added in parentheses around spinal adjustment or chiropractic adjustment, and then I've added the Boolean term and in capitals, and then parentheses around neck pain, followed by an and in capitals, and then adults. So this means that it is looking for articles that include either spinal adjustment or chiropractic adjustment, and also includes neck pain and adults. So in this search, PubMed has looked for all texts and it's produced 378 matching articles. So you can see it's finding a lot less than the Google Scholar using the exact same search terms. Again, it's hard to read though, 378 articles. You're not going to read 378 articles. So again, you want to narrow it down by putting in a few more filters. So for example, you can put the dates that you want to be looking at, and we can narrow it down with a few other little tricks. So let's have a look at doing that. So to narrow it down, if you look on the left-hand side of the search page, I've copied in this left-hand side into the boxes A and B on the slide here. You can see it gives you many options that you can tick. And these are ways to narrow down your search results. So for example, you may tick just freely available articles, or you want to search for abstracts. Now, abstracts give you a broader search, and full text, obviously, especially free ones, narrows it down quite significantly. It's a bit of a problem, though, to just search for free text, because free text just means published articles that someone has paid for open access, but it doesn't narrow down all the available scientific evidence that's out there. So I find that a little bit wrong in some ways, because you should be searching for all available research on the topic, not just those that are free or open access. But you can also narrow it down by choosing the article type. So again, you can look at clinical trials or randomized clinical trials or systematic reviews or meta-analyses. This can be very useful, especially if you're looking for a clinical question, like some cause and effect for a specific intervention for a specific health outcome, right? That's the definition of a clinical study. It's quite good to start with maybe a systematic review or a meta-analysis and get a good idea about that topic by reading those first, and then looking at the RCTs a bit later on. To get the systematic reviews and meta-analyses, you'll very quickly find out what is the efficacy of a particular intervention for a particular health outcome. And that might be the key thing that you're wanting to look for. So it's quite a good idea to be able to tick on clinical trials or systematic reviews or meta-analyses here. You can also narrow it down again by publication date. So again, if you just want articles in the last 5 years or last 10 years, this is very useful. In this example, by choosing to narrow down our search down to publications in the last 5 years, choosing RCTs and reviews, our search results have gone from 378 to 18. And 18 articles is doable. It's a useful way of narrowing things down. You can also do an advanced search on PubMed. So right up the top under the search box, you can click on advanced. And here you can choose then the study field that you want to be looking for your search term in. So you could specify that you want that search term to be in the title or the abstract or somewhere in the entire article. Or you can narrow it down again by the specific author, specific editor, or specific mesh term. I will touch on what a mesh term is in a minute. So you can also specify what words you want PubMed to be searching for in which places, and that can be very useful. So you can go to advanced search, and under search term, you choose where you want it to be found. Now, just before we end this off, mesh terms, they stand for medical subject headings. and it's official words or phrases selected to represent a specific biomedical concept. So different people use different terms in different ways. And we know that, right? The medical word for subluxation is very different than the chiropractic word for subluxation. So that's why there exists this medical subject headings or MESH terms library. So this MESH term list, it's a growing list. It evolves because obviously language evolves, but some chiropractic terms may not yet be accepted MESH terms. And often if you're writing an article and you're submitting an article for publication, you have to put in MESH terms. So some chiropractors have been annoyed with me for not using chiropractic terminology in my search terms. Well, I'm not allowed. If it's not an accepted MESH term, I'm not necessarily allowed to put in those words. So you have to look up what terms do exist and don't exist. For example, if you go to MESH, the actual URL for MESH, I've put it on here for you, and you put in vertebral subluxation, it doesn't exist. You find things like joint dislocation and lens subluxation, which is a displacement of the lens behind the pupil, and shoulder dislocation. You don't find our version of what a vertebral subluxation is, which is a real shame and a real problem. So hopefully with time this will evolve and change, but just be aware that there is such a thing as an acceptable list of medical subject headings that can go in as search terms for journal articles. Doesn't mean you can't use the word vertebral subluxation in an article, but you can't put it as a MESH term because it's not an official MESH term yet. We're also going to now take a look at another popular search engine called Scopus, but first, pause and test yourself about PubMed.